Hello, everybody. It's nice to see you today. My name is Dustin Cormier, and today we're watching How to Rock Astrology. I'm very excited to have a fellow experienced astrologer coming on my show today. Today, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Linda Joyce. Thank you so much for joining me, Linda.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Definitely.
Yes, I'm very
My
excited.
favorite topic is astrology. So
Wonderful. Oh, well, I'm so glad to have you here, Linda. Now,
okay.
you've been an astrologer for quite a few years now.
Yes.
I found you on an article actually on Google. It was just mentioning some of the well-known astrologers who've been doing the thing for a long time. So, if you don't mind my asking, Linda, how long have you been doing astrology for?
At least 40 years. Jesus.
No kidding. At least 40 years. Right on. So you've been doing it for a long time, since you were probably quite a bit,
I was a baby in diapers.
Oh, were you?
Nobody in my family was an astrologer, but my father was definitely an intellect and a philosopher and a writer and metaphysically orientated. He had books
Cool.
on mysticism and philosophy and whatever you wanted. And so I was raised kind of with a little bit of that.
Coming into tune with that. Now,
Yeah.
what I'm going to show here, Linda, is I'm going to show everybody a little picture of your sign energies as we've
Of
just
course.
discussed them. So this is our lovely Linda Joyce. You are Sagittarius rising with Aquarius sun and Aries moon.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a pleasure to have you here today. For everybody watching, this is my own chart as well. I'm Leo rising with Scorpio sun and Sagittarius moon. You and I both have a lot of fire energy going on, and I'm very excited to be talking to somebody who's as charming as you are and who has the same excitement for philosophy as I do.
Yes, I do. I love it. I think
Wonderful.
astrology was the best thing that ever happened to me because you can never know enough. You can never learn enough. You can always expand your consciousness and how you think about something. If you learn something new from a client, from just life, I mean, it's amazing. It keeps you, to me, it doesn't keep me stuck. I think most people get stuck, even in astrology. They get used to interpreting something in a certain way, and God forbid if it should shift.
No kidding.
No, I used to be a big part of the NCGR. I mean, I spoke at all the conferences and stuff, and they were not that open to new ideas and letting people in. I hate to say it, but I am happy to go online to say it because
No problem. I was going to ask you about it.
yeah, they didn't welcome new people that easily, and that didn't go well with me because I thought it would be a lot more flowing, a lot more eager to embrace new people, new ideas. And I actually started to feel stuck. I left.
And that's the NCGR.
National Council of Geocosmic Research.
Okay.
It's the organization that actually runs a lot of the conferences across the country.
Gotcha. Okay. So that's very interesting to me, Linda, because I find that in the world of astrology, especially in today's time, with the advent of YouTube and the internet, lots of people, astrology finds its bones in the culture of wherever it comes from. And just like language, we as astrologers often find that we're trying to communicate a language with another person speaking another language, even though a chair is a chair, whether you say it in Spanish or English or French. But sometimes the linguistics of different cultures can really make things different.
Oh, there's a lot of things that can make it different. And also just your own experiences and own interpretation of that. And that's the problem. It limits us if you're not open to new ideas and change because like anything else, people get set in a certain way of doing something and they don't like change. And if you don't evolve, I think you've missed the meaning of astrology because if I was still the same astrologer I was 20 years ago, 5 years ago, I wouldn't be happy with myself.
No kidding.
Yeah.
So there is a lot these days on the internet world with
I haven't gone there, but I know there is. And what drives me crazy is that so many people who have only been studying it for a very short time have themselves up as experts.
This is something that I'm very curious about as well. I mean, what's funny in the internet world is that somebody like me, I've only been doing astrology for I've been obsessed with it for about 10 years, but that's me I'm nowhere close to
Mhm.
the amount of experience that you've had.
Well, but you never know. It's just how you're open to learning and stuff. It's not the number of years. You could have somebody who's done it forever and be stuck in the same way they did it.
Oh,
Now,
wonderful.
yeah. So, I mean, I don't judge someone because they've only been doing it for a couple, but I think I'm basing it on that. I've had a couple people come to me to teach them astrology. And then in like, not that I taught them very much because I only had a couple sessions with them. And in a matter of a couple of months, they're online like professionals, and they're not.
Yeah.
There's no way they could be.
No kidding. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I imagine that, especially when it comes to something like astrology, which I think a lot of people get very excited to read about the philosophy and the mythos of the symbols of astrology. And I think that that's where a lot of people come from with the internet age, is that you don't necessarily need to have years as a counselor to talk about the sun in Taurus.
No, you don't have to, but
I agree with that.
Like you can be there and you might have a specific point of view that is what everybody needs to learn. I'm not trying to judge someone who learns something very quickly. It's just that it's the kind of study that it would be very difficult for me, and I should only say it personally, for me to even define myself as knowing so much, because there's so much to know. And I limit my studies to basically the basics because you never know enough.
No
If you
kidding.
study everything and every little thing, you're never going to know as much. I mean, I'm not saying you shouldn't know what it's about, but
Right.
but I thought, I said I'm going to limit myself to these basic stuff, and I've never gotten too much past it because I never know enough.
And you almost, I think that when you're working with a client, this opens up the dimension of astrology that relates to counseling. And when it comes to counseling,
listen, it was almost the counseling comes because if you tell somebody their issues, positive and negative, to me, I could not for very long leave them in the lurch of these things, because if you don't have some counseling, you don't understand what you could do with what seems to be a limitation, or let's just say you're very controlling. Maybe that comes from your childhood, it's like, because you had to be. Maybe you raised your parents and you had to be in control long before you had to be. Now that's going to influence everything you do in your life.
Certainly.
But if you don't understand where it came from and how to begin to soften it, because you'll never totally get rid of it.
And even, as an astrologer, I'm coming to find in my practice that there's a lot of times where, somebody build the island of themselves on attributes that don't serve them. Like, for example, being controlling in the way that you mentioned. Somebody might have learned that behavior from their childhood, as you've mentioned. And when we do a counseling session, I suppose you have to kind of account for tell a person like that.
I mix it up, because when I started, what I did was I turned the 12 signs of the zodiac into 12 questions about your parents. 6 for your mother, 6 for your father, because there's yin and yang. Now, what I came down to is I don't ask all of them anymore, but if you do answer all of them, it's really amazing. But I've limited it down to about 4, 2 for your mother, 2 for your father. Something. If I know the answers to those 2 questions, it kind of kicks off the chart. I mean, because it's all there.
It's almost, I would almost be inclined to say that every person shows potentials in their chart, but you can't really tap into how to have a conversation about how the person relates to what's in the chart until you have a real world conversation about what has led them through their lives.
Okay. I'm going to give you an example of how. I'll give you an example, because otherwise people go, what is she talking about? Okay. Let's just take somebody, I use controlling, but let's say for the right reason, because this unfortunately happens way too often from both men and women. I think it's worse for women sometimes. But let's say that your parents weren't very smart, or they were alcoholics, or they were never home, and you had siblings. And let's say that under the circumstances, you had to raise yourself, or maybe even your siblings.
Yep.
Even though they're there, they're
Mhm.
present, but they're not. And they're
Right.
not there to talk to you about things. Let's say they're drug addicts, whatever.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be, they could be workaholics, drug addicts. They could be just fantasy land. I mean, unfortunately, there's a lot of reasons.
Or even just emotionally out of touch.
Yes. So you are this, so you're not a weakling, let's say. You're not a weakling.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't become a victim, which is always the choice.
Mm-hmm.
You could become that drug addict. You could become that whatever.
Yeah.
Or you want to take charge, and you take charge of your world. You take charge of, if you have a sibling, because most of them do, but not everyone.
Mm-hmm.
So you take charge of that. So now you go through life and you wonder why your life hasn't really changed. You're always, they come to me and then it's like, and all I need to know is that, because once, if you had to have over responsible when you were a child with
Mm-hmm.
nobody to direct you, there's a couple of things that happen, and they really hurt relationships, because number one, you have trouble receiving because you had to be in control long before you received. Child didn't receive. You had to figure it out yourself. Don't touch the fire. Don't do this. Don't. I had a girlfriend whose parents were alcoholic. She has trouble barbecuing or cooking because she had to cook for her and her little sister because her parents were always drunk.
Right.
So, and she's controlling.
Yes, right.
Okay.
And I guess that controlling nature was something that saved her from being
It saved
victimized.
her, but now it interferes with her ability to receive love.
I see.
Or help or assistance. She won't ask for it because she's not used to. She's used to taking care of everything herself. Mm-hmm. So what happens is you have trouble receiving. If you can't receive, you can't love.
No kidding. Absolutely.
And second of all, you can't trust because you had nobody to trust growing up. So you had to do everything. So it's very hard for you to give somebody else the power to do something, even if they're good at it. Yes. So you've now limited you have now put yourself into a scenario that will perpetuate your childhood the rest of your life unless you understand how to change it.
Right. Wow. Now, what I almost feel, Linda, is that would you use astrology as a way to kind of help a person claw through that? Or would you need to act as a psychological counselor so the person...
Because I see that and I say, okay, these are some of the issues, and let's see what's in your chart. Now, what's in the chart is a kind of a way, maybe a way out. You can see it in the chart. I mean,
that's what I thought. Yeah.
It's got to be in the chart that they're controlling, or whatever. That's why they came in, maybe to learn about it.
Right.
But there's also the way through. If you understand, the wonderful thing about bringing up the childhood, it's not their fault. In fact, they're a hero. But if they don't change their ways, then it will become something that brings them down instead of enhancing their life. Certainly. So for a lot of women who come to me who've done this, they always pick men who want them to take care of them, and they never give back to them. And I say, well, then you have to realize this is what you're doing. You're attracted to somebody who will let you take charge of everything, and now you're angry because you're in charge of everything.
And now you have to do everything.
But you have trouble with somebody who says, oh, let me do that for you. You would panic and run out the door. And it's that powerful sometimes.
Right. No kidding.
Okay. So you just have to get used to it. So if they're willing to work on it, if just talking about it, taking different situations, giving yourself a challenge. Okay, don't solve his problems or her problems. Ask if somebody says, can I do this for you? Say yes, even if you're dying inside.
Yeah.
Take deep breaths and allow yourself to live through the fear that somebody's doing something for you. Now, somebody who loves to be taken care of will say, can't even imagine that. How could anybody be afraid of receiving?
Right.
Anything is possible. Is how, unfortunately, our childhood cement a lot of things in our life.
Right. And sometimes it's for better or worse. Exactly. There are oftentimes I find there's an old Indian phrase, and I use it a lot in my counseling. And what it is that when you're washing a baby, you don't want to throw the baby away with the bathwater. Meaning, with something like this, with this controlling issue, sometimes a person will need to adjust it because it's not serving them, but sometimes a person has to own it at some level.
Well, you can't adjust it until you own it.
Right. Thank you, Linda. That's a that's a clarifying way to put it.
You have to own it. Otherwise, you have to say, "Oh, this is my issue," and laugh at it and make it something that is that you accept. If I always say, I helped a girl. She came to me for over a year, and she had been through everybody, a therapist, everything. She was what is it called? Why can't I remember when you throw up for control?
Oh, it's but bulimic or bulimic. Yep.
Yep. She had bulimia, and she was very smart. The problem with somebody who's very smart, who comes to anybody, whether it's a therapist or an astrologer, is that, well, she was coming to me for now my life coaching. And I knew that she would just tell me what I wanted to hear because she's very smart. She could tell exactly what you want, where you're going with that. And so as long as we had a real conversation, that I would get nowhere with her, like all the other therapists. So what I did was I started to use visualization, where I set up these visualizations where she would have to look at certain fears and certain things. And it all came from her. I just guided her through it, and I'm intuitive enough to be in the vision with her, to feel it and see it. Wow. And so if she had to face something, I would say, okay, fears, let's put them in these boxes, which is the biggest box. And then we let one go. I mean, all these things, but she had to do all of these things, but they all came from her, not from me.
Right. Wow. That's amazing. I've never heard that kind of visualization.
Well, I invented it. Why? Just for me, just to help her.
Right.
And guess what? And I told her, bulimia is not your enemy. It's how you got control in your life. It's your friend, but it's hurting you now. So you have to say goodbye to it. You have to thank it for serving you in life and let it go. And when we ended the year, that's what I had her do. Because you can't control anything that you don't accept.
Right. So I often say that you catch more flies with honey than you do with vinegar, especially.
Think of it. It's like anything. Even if it's the person, if you're just critical of a person, they're never going to listen to you. But if you love them like a child, if you love them and then you give them difficult things that challenge them, they will listen to you because you've already accepted them. But if a parent never accepts you, you're never going to listen to them. You might try to force them in life, but you're not going to get anything going. And it really has to come from the person. And we talked about this when we had our first chat, is that when I was the new astrologer, I just, like everybody else, I just wanted to give them all the information to show them how smart I was.
Right.
And I knew all of this about them. I knew this. I could tell them this, all of this. I don't do that anymore. Not that I don't have that information available. Of course I do. But it is about how much can you connect to the person and where are they coming from. And if you just do a standard reading on that person who raised themselves with control, they're not going to get the same message.
Wonderful. And I guess different people need to hear it in a different way. I have a question that kind of relates to this, Linda. How I would ask it. It's almost a trick question. I think you're going to understand where I'm coming from.
No problem.
Is it healthy and appropriate to say that an astrologer's job is to fix people?
No.
What do you think about that phrase?
I don't like fixing anybody.
Good, because I think a lot of astrologers, especially young astrologers these days, say, oh, good, now I have the tools to fix people. And so then they bluntly apply their knowledge.
How I would change that word is enlighten them.
Wonderful.
Because if you enlighten somebody about who they are and why they're that way, and what do you want to do with that? Are you happy with how you're living your life? Then I'm not interfering. If you're not happy and you want to receive and you want to learn something new, then I can help you do that. Wow. But the number one thing that most people don't have is the ability to say no. And that's the second lesson in the zodiac from Taurus.
Wow.
That's the terrible twos, where when you say no to a Taurus, they don't pay any attention to you. They
Cool.
can learn to say no to you. But it's really about setting boundaries with your desires and what you want. If you can't structure it and know what's right and wrong, values is the second house also, good and bad. Wow. If you don't know what's good and bad for you. Now, it might not really hurt you for the rest of your life if you eat a whole bag of chocolate chip cookies and they're bad for you, because you might throw up and just look at another chocolate chip cookie and it won't mean the same thing. But of course, it can be other things. It could be drugs. It could be this. It could be the wrong person. It could be all sorts of things that can get you into trouble.
Right. I almost feel like it must be very difficult for somebody to build a new sense of self, or to come to an astrologer with an appropriate clean slate when they themselves are unsure about their own boundaries, about their identity, about
I don't, I mean, I think it's different. I think most people don't have a clue who they are and what they want. I don't
right.
think people know what they want. There are a few people who are clear on it, and that's wonderful. But most people don't know who they are and what they want. And so, but if you act like you do, you might know more than they do in some way, but if you have that attitude, you're never going to reach them. If you position yourself as all powerful or above somebody, they're going to feel it. You have to relate to them on the simplest things, on the simple way. You have to connect to someone. If you connect to somebody and they know that you care and you would like to help them and you're going to show them a few things, then they'll open up to you and you'll have a real discussion. But if you're just coming across to show that you know so much, but the problem is that I have this, my first book I wrote is called The Day You Were Born. It uses your sun sign and birthday number. So what's your birthday number again?
My birthday number is the 8th of November.
Okay, so you're the Scorpio 8. Wow. So Scorpio, which we know, and the 8 is Capricorn. So in Chaldean numerology, and every number relates back to a planet. So in my book, I take the number, and a lot of people are not like their sun sign, they're like their number.
Oh, cool.
Their number sign. And I can read somebody with just those two things without a chart. I mean, I can't read as much as I could with a chart.
Right.
But when you're at Barnes and Noble or you're at something and somebody wants to know, you don't have their chart. You just have their birthday. Well, now if you have the number two, you know that whenever you have two, you have duality, you have conflict.
And you can, wonderful. As long as you've got those two items, you can start talking about Scorpio likes this and doesn't like this. This Chaldean numerology likes this and doesn't like this, and they have to get that together.
And you can put it together with somebody else, because a lot of times the numbers clash, or there's too much water in both of them, or too much Neptune or whatever, or too much control. Whatever it is, you can read it, and it's there. And I've been using it now for 20 years, so I'm got good at it.
Wow.
But I wasn't bad at it when I first did it. I spent a long time writing that book, and I've just redone it. I've put new people in. Because the people 20 years ago, half of the people don't know who they are today, except for the few famous people.
Right. Like no kidding. Yeah.
You know, like, who's that? You know, you got to have the Kardashians now or somebody else. Or
no kidding. No kidding. It's just what it is these days.
Yeah. But anyway, it's a wonderful tool to have. It actually, I was just on the Housewives, the Real Housewives, The Ultimate Vacation down in Turks and Caicos. My son lives in Turks and Caicos. And I got the job because they were looking for astrologer, psychic, or someone. And of course, I couldn't read their charts. He wanted me to read them. Like, if I didn't have the sun sign and birthday number combination thing, which I read each one of them in 2 seconds, because I could tell them something.
Right. And that's part of the fun of being an astrologer, trying to show like, well, I know what.
Well, that was fun, because that's just playing, you know.
Yeah.
Playing with them. You're not changing anybody's life, but you might wake them up a little bit. But what you can see in a chart is a lot of times what's hidden. But a lot of people don't want to know what's hidden. I remember reading a very good client of mine. She was very well known in England. I used to go to England a lot. And her new boyfriend really had a bad temper. But he didn't show it.
Right.
And she didn't think he had it. So when I told her he had a temper, she didn't want to speak to me anymore.
She thought that she was doing something personal or something like that.
Well, no, she just didn't want to judge him. She didn't want to see anything wrong with him, because she wanted the right relationship, and to her it was perfect. And now I'm pointing something out. I said, listen, it's not going to come out that often, because it was really shielded. It was intercepted too. So and I'm probably hidden in, I think it was even in the 12th house, which makes it come out only on certain occasions.
Right, but it's there. Yeah.
I was trying to prepare her for those certain occasions. So
right. Yeah.
But she didn't want to hear it. So.
And she wasn't quite ready for that information.
And you have to always be realizing that when you're going to tell somebody, is it important to tell them or is it not?
Right. That's wonderful, Linda. So I would like to ask you, uh, you know, I'm finding again in the astrology world these days, I imagine that it's very different from when you started,
Oh,
because a lot of the times I find a lot of astrologers these days, I'd like to ask you about this. As I interview more and more people,
mhm.
there's an approach that's, I think, a building, and it's really metaphysically centered. It's almost like the idea is that the essence of what the person wants to be is already in their heart. It's already in their genes. It was in them before they went through their childhood programming in psychology.
Mhm, mhm.
So a lot of astrologers, what they've been doing is they will kind of talk to a person. They'll ask a little bit about what the person's needs are, and they'll survey the chart. This is what a lot of astrologers are doing, is they're learning to survey the chart, but not dig too much into anything. What they do is they sit with the person and they ask them a few questions, find out who the person is, find out how the person's past childhood programming relates to the chart, so that when an astrologer is sitting with you, they're not telling you who you are. They are leading you, as you said, to a state of enlightenment about your condition. So I'm going to try to break down my question here. When you're approaching a client, how much pre-study do you do of their chart before you interact with them?
It really depends on the chart. There's some charts I can look at and I know it in 2 minutes.
And it's there, and it's right there. The problem
And
is going to be right there.
sometimes, and particularly lately, I've had a few that are really challenging, really,
Mm.
really challenging to understand. Because see, I'm at a point now that at the chart I don't know a chart unless it starts talking back at me.
Yeah, right. Mm-hmm.
And I look at it, I can see all these points, but if it doesn't now start to tell me who it is, then I know I don't have it.
Right. And I've experienced that myself. There are times when, it's a sad fact that some people's life experience does not have, like when we play chess, it's beautiful to see a simple chess game coming through where this person is clearly winning and the other person is losing. But in the same way, some people's lives don't have a simple setup for the enlightenment that they need to have
And
a
some of
clear
them don't
path to
want
be
the
happy.
enlightenment. Not
Mhm.
everybody wants it.
That was the B that I was going to say, is that even some people do have a clear path, but they are being
Well, you have
obstructed.
to test. It's not up to you to hit them over the head and tell them what they don't want to hear. You're there
Mm.
to, they're paying you because they want something from you. If you can't figure out what that is, I
Mm.
mean, you can ask them, and most of the time they'll have some simple answers on what relationship or career or this or something happened or whatever it is. And you can certainly answer that. But if you can go a little deeper, of course, into it,
Mm.
um, give them a connection to why they're doing it the way they're doing it. And what I think more than that, even is how is the way out.
Mm. I'm
Astrology
interested.
is
I
the way
agree with you.
it
Uh,
really does. Astrology is a journey.
mm.
Yes, it's very much like Joseph Campbell's books, the hero's journey. You start off in the beginning and you go through this process, this spiritual process. And you have to go out into the world and you have to overcome a lot of challenges, that will
Right.
help you become who you are.
Mhm.
And very few people really go through that whole journey. They
Who?
usually get stuck along the way.
No
But
kidding.
but also, I think one of the things I just had this flash of it, and I
Yeah.
think would be interesting is that something that don't assume that something that looks a certain way in a chart. Never play God,
Mm.
because, for example, I was still studying astrology. This was my second teacher, and I had a girlfriend who was marrying an Argentinian, um, a very good looking, wealthy Argentinian. And he looked at their chart and he was saying, he says, they're not going to make it. Their wedding is in the summer. They're not going to make it. They're both getting separated in the summer. I looked at it and I couldn't believe it because I could tell that they were really in love. And I thought, oh,
Mhm.
this is going to be, well, guess what? He was wrong, but he was right and he was wrong.
Mm.
There was a breakup in the summer, but not between them.
Ah.
She got her divorce papers through from her ex-husband. They
Wow.
finally got completed, and he got temporarily disinherited from his father because they got in a big fight. So it happened at the same time, and it was in both of their charts, but it had nothing to do with them. So don't play God. Don't tell
Whoa, got
someone
it.
you're going to get separated. Say you have a problem here at this time. In the summer, you're going to have some disconnection. Don't assume that you know always the answer, because you don't.
Right. And
And
nobody
you could
could.
do a lot of damage if you think you're God.
I completely and understand that, and I completely agree with that. I imagine that there's a lot of astrologers who are probably, you know, I almost want to kind of think of it this way, because you're an experienced astrologer. I've been trying to think of the reason why an astrologer would come. I like to put things at an ethical point of view, but I like it to also have a material
Of course.
reasonability. So this is what I mean when I say this. I'm trying to think of what would our inspiration be as astrologers to not just tell people what they want to hear, because people can come to me and they've got all these
tell them what
problems.
they don't want to hear, isn't it?
Sorry,
If
could you say it again?
If you don't have a good manners and how to tell somebody something they don't want to hear, you're going to be in trouble.
Right. Well, what I'm, my first question is why is it important to insist on trying to give more than just what a person wants to hear, but to consider helping guide a person through what they don't want to hear?
Okay, so it's all how you're looking at it. In the beginning, that would be very hard for any astrologer to do.
Right.
The more experience you have, what happens is that you start to see the bigger picture of the person. You see where they have, what they're good at, what they're blocking. Now, if somebody comes to me, I was just telling, somebody comes to me, do you know how many times I've had somebody say this to me? I only want to hear about career, not about relationships.
Right.
So now I know the only thing they really want to hear about is relationships. How do I get there?
Yeah, totally. Because a person could have, yeah, I see. Because
you see they're blocking it, but they really want it. Now that's one way. There's so many ways that it can go wrong. And usually, if I give them all the other information and they feel comfortable with me because I'm not being judgmental and I'm not being, but that I've made a connection with them, then I can say, well, there is something about relationships in your chart. Would you like to hear that? Blah, 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 blah. After all, you have Gemini ruling this and that or whatever. And,
right. Okay.
You can sneak it in, and then depending on how they respond to the first, usually they open up. There's only been 3 times in my whole career that I had trouble with a client.
Okay.
And,
wow.
And one of them, he was nuts, and I was glad that most of my clients are referrals.
Okay.
These 2 people, or these 3 people, but these 2 people, anything I said, it was not true. It didn't matter what it was.
I've had that experience myself, actually.
Yes. And so I don't go that far with it. When you know that the basics, they're just they can't accept anything. So I say, listen, obviously this is not working, so why don't I just not charge you and we'll call it.
Wonderful. I appreciate that, Linda, because as an astrologer who's starting off, like when that happens, I get all weird about the fact that
they're not listening to you. But guess what happened? Each one of those people turned on the dime once I rejected them in a very nice way.
Right.
Because they were just trying to keep the control. And rejection is very powerful. The third person, the guy, he was just nuts. I couldn't wait to get him out the door.
Yeah, you mentioned that. Yeah.
Yes. But the other 2 people actually became clients of mine for a while because I said, they were just objecting to anything I said, and they knew it.
So
but
instead of reacting with, yeah, I see, Linda, because I think instead of reacting with your own ego and saying, okay, you came to me and you need help, so I'm the one who knows what's going on, so obviously you don't know what's going on. Instead of making them feel like a fool for not listening to you, how you approached it is that it seems to me like my approach of trying to convey information to you doesn't seem to be working. And at that point, they started thinking, this lady's actually being nice. She's not trying to take my money, but I seem to be the issue. Now, and that's when they
know right away when you reject them.
That it's something.
But I only reject them, and that's only not that. That's like everything I said was a no. If people I have trouble with them in the reading, I usually can know where the trouble's coming from, and you can usually get around it. But the problem is, from what I get from how you're saying it, is that you think that you have to, number one, you think you have to give them all the answers, that you have to be right, that you have to be in charge. No, give them the power. You're in charge.
Wonderful.
They don't have the information. Let them feel. If you disempower them, some people have big control issues.
Right.
If you take on too much control, they're not going to listen to you. You have to start a conversation.
I see that, because that's the real, I mean, especially I think as a young man, I think it's a common thing for a lot of young people to be trying to talk to somebody.
Of course.
And when what they're trying to say is not properly conveyed, it's easy to just, block it and say, okay, this person doesn't work with me. Obviously this person's the problem and I don't need to change.
Yeah, well, because it becomes a battle right away between you and the person. I always look at the client as a big challenge. Now, how am I going to reach this person? Now, I'm not always going to reach them the same way I reach them automatic.
Right.
Half of the people, or more than half, yeah, you could do it the same way and it would all work out. But a lot of people are very sensitive about receiving the truth, receiving information, receiving any knowledge that might scare them. And you have to be careful of their fear, because that's what's going to destroy the session is fear.
I completely understand. Like, I don't know if it's because I'm a young man and I think about it this way, but I really think about it in terms of romance. You can't force a person to like you. You can't force a person to agree with you. It's a game of making your wisdom attractive on its own 2 feet.
You have to be able to understand your wisdom in more than one way. Let's take something as simple as Saturn. Something as simple as Saturn. Which is the 8 in Chaldean numerology. And the 8 is actually the inner and the outer is in flow to each other. By the time you get to Capricorn, the inner spirit and the outer ego relate to each other. They should. If you're blocked, then no. Take one of the greatest Capricorns ever, Muhammad Ali. Talk about inner and outer.
Yeah.
He had a strong inner world and faith in himself. Didn't matter what he encountered, and he loved people, he helped people, but you couldn't throw him off his track. He was in sync with himself, and because of that, the world loved him, because he came from the right place. Now, very few people have that kind of sync, and what's really interesting is if you go to the Museum of Natural History, and if you see the mountain goat, you know how they always picture Capricorns with the mountain goat on the peak of the mountain with the feet together, and well, the mountain goats, I looked at this stuffed mountain goat in the glass thing, and it was like the hump and the front was the figure 8.
Oh, cool.
It was the balance that, no wonder they could balance themselves putting their feet together if they ever did that, is because the front and the back were totally balanced perfectly.
And equal.
It was like 2 circles.
Wow.
The humps and the front. And it was so apparent in the museum that I was like, wow. I said, that's really amazing. And now Capricorns are either blocked or very amazing, because they can have, my son's a Capricorn.
Yep.
And he is, I think, an amazing Capricorn, because he's very self-confident, always was from a little boy. You couldn't tell him he was a terror to raise.
Yeah.
But what's good about him is I see him in the world. He's so caring about people. He really cares. He helps his friends out to the nth degree. I am so amazed at what he will go through to help them. And at the same time, don't you take advantage of him. Don't you abuse him, because you will meet a monster.
Right.
He will not be pushed around. Now, he may not, if it's not the right time to do it with his ego, he will do it.
No kidding. So would you say that Capricorn esoterically in a way?
And number 8, you got a lot of Capricorn energy. I bet it's strong in your chart.
I feel like it is. And, you know, I'm even curious about this just for my own sake, because I have this Chaldean numerology. If there are any planets in Capricorn, would that say something about my basic sun nature?
Well, sure. And even if where Saturn is and how connected it is to the rest of the planets. But obviously, Capricorn should be very strong in your chart in some way. What house does it rule?
It rules my sixth cusp is in Capricorn.
Oh,
I'm a Leo rising.
Right.
The cusp.
I didn't even figure it out.
Yeah. No
and where is Saturn?
Saturn is right next door in Aquarius at like 1 degree of Aquarius.
Okay, so that's in your 7th house then?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so that's really, and so are you attracted to Capricorn people?
Hugely.
Okay, so
I would certainly say so.
You're projecting a lot of your Capricorn.
Interesting. Very interesting. So are you saying because Capricorn is already a strong influence through my sun numerology, and the ruler of Capricorn,
but it doesn't mean how you're using it. You're attracted to Capricorn people, aren't you?
Yeah, I would say so, certainly.
Yeah, but you see, you have a flow about you. Capricorns can be, well, it doesn't. My son is not stuck like you. He's not like a stuck person in any way.
Yep.
He will meet a challenge and do it, but he perseveres. That's a very good Capricorn thing.
Gotcha.
A certain amount of, he built his restaurant in Turks and Caicos, Boogaloo's. It's one of the best restaurants on the island, but it started from, it was going to be a conch shack or something. Right. But he persevered and it just grew, and he had a vision. He did have a vision. He loved that island. He lives there. Mm-hmm. So what I'm trying to say is that if you have a vision and a passion, you'll create it.
Wow.
But how did he create it? Through perseverance. And he got people who supported him because he was so impassioned about what he was doing.
Wow. I feel like I relate to that a lot in myself.
So certainly. You don't have to always use the energy 100% of yourself, because we're all connected. Remember, you know, some of it is more personal, but some of it is, we get it through other people and it feeds us. Like I have no earth in my chart. You know, I don't, and I'm all air and fire.
Yeah. Love it.
And half of it's in, 3 planets are in the 3rd house. Aquarius rules my 3rd house.
Gotcha.
Because I have an interception. But anyway, I'm all about communication. So to me, it's not just, astrology is a tool for me to communicate to people, but people are still the number one thing, not astrology.
I agree with that. I totally agree with that.
So if astrology and my smartness becomes more important than the person, they will sense that, and they will not love me the same way.
Right.
And
they won't.
I put them first, and I'm using astrology to help them see themselves.
Wonderful.
So I just showed you just how you might use your Saturn, but it's in a benign way. It's in a loving way. It's not like, oh, you're not using your Saturn.
Right. Totally.
Then you're just projecting it. You see how you say something.
Certainly. I'm excited to learn about what
how
you're
you say something and how you help somebody understand themselves. But if you do it from a loving place, it will come across loving. I love people. I'm a people person.
Certainly.
I go to dinner parties all around the world, and people sit me next to the weirdest people. I always find a way to have a great conversation with them and really enjoy them, because I love people. And I could be the snobbiest woman in the world sitting next to me, but as long as I'm willing to talk about them and not myself, it's not a problem.
I agree with that.
So, and other people and whatever. And so if you have a big ego, you're going to be in trouble, because you won't be able to connect to everyone, because not everybody's going to feed your ego.
Certainly. Although, you know, what's funny is that I've taken a lot from Indian and Vedic astrology.
Yes, you said that.
They have a lot of solar sun energy in their astrological culture. I've even seen a lot of the times where some people will respect a certain astrologer because they have this like Maharaj energy. They have the benevolent father guru energy. And people will come to the person just to be a father. I find a lot of women who don't have good fathers will go to men like this, and
Yes,
whether the
absolutely.
guy is telling them what's actually good for them is irrelevant, because they're looking for that
Right.
archetype, which, you know, this does say that there are different astrologers for different jobs.
There is it. And the worst thing you can do as an astrologer, up and coming astrologer, whoever you are, is to try and be like everybody else.
Oh,
And
cool. That's helpful.
If you listen to everybody else, they'll try to put you into a cookie cutter kind of thing, which I was never good at ever. I'm an Aquarian, 3 planets in Aquarius, Saturn. Nobody's going to put me in a cookie cutter, whether I had a voice or not. And I got my voice stronger. The older I got a strong voice. Now, forget it.
Right. No kidding.
I can say whatever I need to say, and I can say it nicely. But the thing is that's one of the first things that most people are not happy because they can't say the truth because it might hurt somebody's feelings. And if you're Libra rising, Sun in Libra, or in the wrong house, when I say wrong house, just a house with projection, let's say, you're going to try to please.
Yes, that's what I was getting at a little bit is.
And if you try to please more than stand in your truth in a very respectful way to others, and I know some people who never have an idea. I have a client who just never knows when they're insulting somebody without even knowing it. You know what I mean?
Certainly.
It's like they don't mean it. They're just not conscious of what they're saying. They just want to say what's in their head, rather than be connected to the world around them and play with the environment. I have a natural connection to my environment. I don't know. I'm not even sure where that comes from, but
very interesting.
But my Jupiter is in a grand trine with all my Aquarius and Uranus. It's I've got a very,
I could see that stellium in the 3rd house probably has a little bit of that Gemini nervous system of things around you, you know? I would think that. I
know. I'm certainly so much better at it now than I was years ago, but I always had a touch of it. I always had a touch of it, and then I just developed it, and I developed it. How did I develop it? Not because I wanted to be the best astrologer in the world. I developed it because I wanted to help my client, and I could see the way I was doing it, I wasn't helping them. That's why when that girl that I knew her parents, she came to me, she had bulimia. I had to figure out a way how to help her because she was too smart. She would try to fool me. And she would tell me what I wanted to hear, and we'd get nowhere. So I just invented a style that I didn't tell her anything. I set up the scenario.
Yeah.
The issues, but she had to tell me what she saw when she met them in her vision.
Wow. And that must have been very good for you to experiment that way.
Oh, all my experiments have led me to things I use constantly. And also I'm psychic, but not in the way you think. I'm not a psychic who will give you a psychic reading.
Yeah, you're not like 8th house psychic. You're more like
come in. But the thing is this, that how was I going to say this? I do past life regressions. I can do them I can see people's past lives so easy. I can't see the future. For a long time, I couldn't see the future, but I could always see the past life.
Right.
Life. I still do. I give past life readings.
Cool.
And when I'm really stuck on a chart, all I have to do is pull up a couple past lives on that chart, and I know what's going on.
Wow. So do you use an empathic intuition while you're talking to the person?
No, I do it before they come if I have trouble. If I have the chart down and it really speaks to me, as I said, I don't know a chart unless it's talking back.
Yeah, cool. So there's a real conversation.
And when it talks back to me, I know I have it because we can have a conversation. When it's blank and I'm not getting information from it, I know I don't have it. I could lip sync some. I could tell anybody anything with as much as I know. I could make it up. Right. I mean, not make it up. It would be right, but it wouldn't be integrated.
Yes, I see.
I have to integrate a chart. You have to integrate what's integrated in that chart and what's not. Some things are cut off, some things aren't. And sometimes it's all working together wonderful, but not always. So the integration of that chart, when it integrates, you can say, I'm not heard. This part of the chart says, no, this is strong, but they ignore me. My voice is not heard. This because the Libra rising, it's all about other people, let's say. But that makes it simple, but it's sometimes a lot more complicated.
I feel that. I'm certainly learning that in my practice. But it's interesting to definitely think that there must be some people who must be of the Libra rising type of character who probably get many people, many clients coming to them because they are such a pleaser. And, you know, just like how that Libra rising type of person should practice astrology based on their strengths that they have inside them. And even if they have a bit of that, too much of that people pleasing Libra, I think abiding
people pleasers. Some people will only go to a people pleaser.
Right. And they can,
and that's fine for them. But also Libra is either very strong. It's one of two things. Either you can fit in and then would be wonderful. You could do both.
Yes, right.
But it's really about your own truth. So how do you hold your truth to your truth among the truths of everybody else? Can you do it? Or do you have to teach them? Can you, when you disagree, stand in your own truth? Because from Aries to Libra, the journey here, you can push, you learn all these lessons, you get there. Now you have to, in order to go for the next half of the chart, which is going to require faith in yourself. You can't rise without faith.
Yes.
You can push your way from Aries to Libra. You can be smart, you could be pushy, you could be this, you could be that. You don't have to be spiritual.
Right.
The rest of the way up, you do.
Yeah, cool. That's very cool.
Yes, you have to rise. From Libra, you have to rise. If you don't rise, and what do you rise on? You don't have to be a good person to rise. You could believe in horrible things and rise. It's about what you believe in and faith. It works if you believe, whether it's good or bad. It's not based on good or bad.
Right.
I could be a Scorpio. I could be a really good Scorpio. I could be a saint. I could be a preacher, or I could be an evil person who wants to control everyone. But I will have faith in my evilness, and I will rise.
And that's power.
And people will lift me up and give me power. Absolutely.
Right.
And then from that 8th house, I'll go to the 9th, and then I'm your guru, not Jesus. You believe in me.
Right. Wow. Very cool. Very interesting, Linda.
Yeah, so that's the turning point. If what your experience is on your earlier life and how you get ahead, if you haven't learned to have faith in yourself by giving and sharing and receiving and sharing with other people, the exchange, I call it.
Yeah.
You need to make an exchange. And the big side of exchange is, there's a couple of them, but Virgo is where you give and receive. You have to be able to do both.
And you really serve in that giving.
Yeah, well, you have a dream. What does it serve? Does it serve money, or does it serve a mission? What's your dream? You want to be an astrologer, let's say? What do you want? You want to be the best astrologer in the world and have your ego served? Or do you want to serve mankind and make a difference? What are you serving is the Virgo. What are you serving? That's what you will still manifest the dream.
Right.
But that's holding it up.
Right.
To serve.
Wow. Very interesting that each one of those signs is going to be either an obstruction or an aid to the evolution of the whole sphere. I always love you, and you put it across very, very, very intelligently, Linda.
Well, thank you.
Certainly.
Yeah, no, I mean, listen, I can talk about astrology forever, but
well, you know, something I want to reach into my brain and think about is that, would you say for those astrologers as well as clients that are watching, I think it's important for me to have this sort of idea. This is more speaking really to fledgling people who are becoming astrologers.
Okay.
You know, I find it's almost thinking like martial arts or like karate. When you are first getting into karate, you look around and you notice everybody's doing the thing. Everyone is doing all the moves and everybody has done them all. So when you first get into it, it almost feels like, I don't know these moves. But if you practice diligently, you'll find that you do learn all the moves. Now, the best martial artists in the world don't just stick to one school. They practice the school that they're in. They instead of thinking a million ways of what's the school I want to do, what type of astrologer do I want to be, they pick one. They pick astrology, they drill it, they get attained with it, and eventually, as they practice, they might go to another one, and they might go to another
Bruce Lee, the best in the world was Bruce Lee, right?
Right.
Okay. Well, Bruce Lee studied. He studied it with some of the best in China over here, but he put it all together.
Yeah.
He put the Western and the Eastern, and he made his own style because neither one worked for him totally the way he thought. You know why? He was coming from inside out.
Wow.
When you come from inside out, outside you have to be perfection, right? You have to measure up to a picture to be right. And when you're coming from inside out, you have to measure up to the feeling and what you conceive as the right thing. If you're not coming from the inside out, then you're going to just try to be perfect. And there's nothing.
And then there's no, it doesn't mean anything to you. It's like the lessons from the moon.
A certain place of notoriety on what you can do because you do it so well, but it's not going to flow. It's not going to come. You're not going to be able to adjust to differences. I mean, I think my best quality is that I can adjust almost any client. I don't make a set way how I'm going to approach this. I have an idea. I always, this is a good way for us, because I know your time is limited here.
Oh, thank you, Linda. Thank you.
I was going to say that the first thing I look for in a chart is two things, actually.
Yeah.
The first thing I look for is the greatest conflict.
Cool. Yep, that makes sense.
What's the problem? What's the conflict? What's the thing? And then what's the talent? What's the automatic talent? Are they psychic? Are they what is it? Are they emotional? And once you know those two things, everything else finds its place.
It's like you have the means to solve the issues that have been identified.
Yes.
Right?
You know, it's like communication was never my problem, even from a little girl. But then I had trouble asserting myself because I had very strong egomaniac parents.
Gotcha. Okay.
So even though I could have had a voice, it took a while for me to get it out, to get there.
Right.
But I was a great observer always. I figured people out. Even when I was a little girl, I was a natural psychologist. Like, what made Dad angry? What was it that pissed him off? That if you wanted to get him angry again, you could just press this button. And if you wanted to hit, I was figuring this out when I was 6 or 7 years old.
Right. Wow. Very interesting how it plays on your talents that were kind of enforced.
And you know, I'm going to share something. This is about the most ego thing I'm going to say to you, but it happened when I was 7.
Sure.
And I think of it as an ego now. I didn't when I was little, but my parents had been in a little argument, and my mother was tucking me in at night, and I said so innocently, "Mommy," I said, "I think Daddy was right."
With the relation, with the
whatever, and I knew exactly why he was right and she was wrong, and she was so pissed at me. She was so angry because she had to be right. My mother was always right, and let me tell you something. 98% of the time she was, but not my father was very smart and philosophical. But what my mother did is she didn't hear what I said. And even as a 7-year-old, I knew it made sense. That's what I can't understand. Most kids would not trust their opinion at 7 over their parents. I knew I was right and my mother was wrong.
Right. Wow.
That meant that I trusted my own instincts.
Yeah. Wow.
And then she proved it by acting out and not even hearing me.
That's very interesting.
So then I knew that I was smarter than my mother.
Yeah, at that time. Wow, that's crazy.
Well, I wasn't smarter than my mother in how life worked, but I needed to listen. So the key is this: when we go back to Libras or anything else, because Libra has the biggest challenge of owning your truth. It's the only reason we're bringing it. But if you don't own your own truth, right or wrong, it might be different than anybody's around you. Let's say you're born in Nazi Germany. Maybe you don't hate Jews. Maybe everybody in your house hates them. And maybe you think, hey, that's not right. They're good people. But you might not be able to say that because you're going to get into trouble. But do you listen to yourself, or do you go into the hate mode because everybody else is doing it? You can separate. You don't have to stand up for it if it's dangerous, but you have to know what it is.
No kidding. So I think I have one more because you're right, we're running for our time here, Linda, but I'd like to ask a big question here.
Sure.
Do you think this is a gross question, because I'm a young astrologer and I had to get out there somehow.
You can be very smart.
Thank you, Linda. So this is where I'm coming from here, is that, do you think at some level that it is appropriate to find your voice as an astrologer by doing astrology, even though you might feel like you're not ready for it, haven't found your voice
I think
yet?
you can have confidence in it, and I think I think that you shouldn't be tiptoeing around. You should own it, but you should also own that it's not just your ego, which I don't think you do, by the way, at all. You listen to people. You listen to me from the first time I talked to you.
Thank you.
So that's not run by ego. That's listening to somebody else's point of view. You have your own. We could even disagree totally, but if we listen to each other, that's amazing.
Yes, I appreciate that.
So the thing is this, is that you have to, I bring that up because I had forgotten about that with my mother. And I just said, because now I have grandchildren. And I would say, how could that 7-year-old child of my daughters, how can, well, I could see they probably think they're smarter than my children.
Or yourself. Yeah. Kids are funny that way.
See, that's not a bad thing. My son always thought he was right. And you know what? He was hard to get to listen to. But you know what? It's what's made him who he is in the world. And he's learned from it. And you know what? All the wisdom I would give him as a child, because I always related things to him. It's so funny. So funny. He thinks back on it now. He really was annoyed. I remember when our neighbors was, this is so funny, but he uses it now in something else. Our neighbors had a swimming pool and we didn't, but we lived in a beautiful neighborhood. And she said, oh, come over whenever you want to go swimming. The pool is here. And my son wanted to go over there. I said, well, we can't just go over. He said, but she said we could go over whenever we wanted. I said, and if we did, we'd never be invited back again.
Cool. Right.
We can't overdo just because you have the invitation doesn't mean that you take advantage of it. Because if you start to take advantage of it, then you're not going to be received.
That's the difference between wisdom and knowledge. Because his knowledge was correct.
He had trouble with that because he heard her say we were invited whenever we wanted. And it drove him nuts. But now that he's older, he realizes he has a close friend of his owns the airlines that goes between the islands there. And if all his employees said, call him, we can't get on the airplane, he saves it for something really important. Because if he answered every one of his friends' calls to call that airline, the guy would never pay any attention to him.
No kidding.
He always goes back to the swimming pool thing.
It's the wisdom and knowledge.
Okay, now my wife really needs this plane ticket and he loves her. So no problem. Call him, ask her to get him on the airplane. No problem. But he doesn't do it that often.
Very interesting.
It also goes back. But I was always into those little seeds of wisdom.
But
the thing is, you have to trust yourself. Don't be afraid to be in charge of your reading, but also don't remember to listen to your client. The client, you have to see the boundaries of your client. How much can they hear you? You might not know right away, but you can test the water. So let's say you have a really difficult thing to tell them and you don't know if they're going to listen to you. Well, you're opinionated, you're too controlling. You're not going to say it that way, but you have to say, well, there is some issues here of control. Were any of your parents very controlling? Because you seem to me to have to always be in charge here. And if I say it properly, they won't take offense.
Right. Yeah.
If I say, this is hurting you, maybe you want to look at it because you are smart. I will always put a compliment in. You are smart, but sometimes you got to listen.
Yes. Yeah. And that can be a delicate thing to have to convey.
But if you say it, I always say lead with a compliment.
Right. Cool. Yep.
Because it opens the door. People relax. If you jump in with just criticism, they're going to shut the door.
Totally.
So you're an incredibly smart person. Usually they are. Usually smarter than the people around them.
Right. Because yes, I understand that. I mean, a lot of people are very smart, but
and you get the job done and you take charge. How wonderful is that? But does that really work for you all the time? Wouldn't you like it if you could let go of that sometime? You see, it's just how you say it.
Totally. That's like the moon element.
Yes, it's how you say something. So I figure out what I have to say for somebody to hear me, and then I say it that way.
Wonderful.
And I always lead with something, and my compliments are always true. I don't make them up.
Yeah. For sure. You're trying to.
People know when you're bullshitting them.
Yeah, gotcha.
You have to take the truth and tell them the truth. This is the truth. I even told the girl that I was helping with the bulimia, I said, listen, you'll tell me what I want to hear. You're in control. Now we're going to listen to you. I told her.
So I almost feel there's two different types of respect a client needs to get from you. They need to feel the sun respect coming from your authenticity, but also the lunar respect coming from your desire to actually connect with them.
Yes, I need to connect with them. If I don't connect with them, I give them nothing.
That's very useful, Linda. And what I almost wanted to say is that I feel like we should convey for the audience that it's important to understand that the client is in a progressive state of knowing how to be a good client. And I think on the other hand, it's also good for everybody. Right. Yeah. And I think it's important to also understand, especially for young astrologers like me, anybody who comes to me should probably also know that I'm in a game of coming into alignment with my truth as well as an astrologer in my profession. So
no, I don't think you have to say that. I don't think you have to say that, because what you're doing now is exposing, you're exposing all your weaknesses on the table, and you need to know those weaknesses, but you don't have to and should not share them with everybody else, because they will eat you up and spit you out for it.
And make you feel, yeah, I get that. It doesn't make you look like a professional. I hate to say it,
but because of my experience with it, I would not say that. That would be the nirvana way of doing it, that everybody's going to treat you right because you don't know. No,
yes,
say what you know and own it. And if you make a mistake, you own that too.
Right.
But there's certain things you can be sure of in a chart. You start with those. That's what I say. I always look at the biggest conflict and the biggest talent, and I go with those obvious things first. If I have some underlying things that I'm not sure about, I work them in and I test the water.
And I guess if you stick to what you do absolutely know, you'll build an internal confidence in your truth, in your word as an astrologer.
Well, you will. And the thing is that part of what you're saying, let's say you weren't 100% right, but part of what you're saying would be right because it's very basic there.
Right.
But then maybe you need to ask some questions about how they feel about that, or how they feel about a parent or whatever, because if it's the moon, maybe it's the mother. If it's not, maybe it's the father. But if you ask a couple of questions, you will see where it comes from, because it doesn't come from nowhere.
Cool. Totally. That is, Linda, I appreciate you, because you have you have a nurturing mother's patience, but you're an experienced astrologer. I really appreciate you having this time with me, Linda.
Oh, are you kidding? I enjoyed it so much. I love meeting you. And
I'm so glad to hear that.
Also, I don't know when it's going to be, but I might have a TV show coming up with 2 other people called The Magic 3.
Oh, cool.
So when that happens, I will certainly let you know.
I would love to know about it.
Yeah. And so we're going in to solve people's problems. So I will be in action.
Awesome. Well, I can't wait to see you doing your thing live on the floor, Linda.
Absolutely.
Now, before we go.
Yes.
Oh, thank you, Linda. You're so patient. I was going to ask if we were to just, feel free to let me know if you have anything on the top of your head. If you don't, it's okay. If you were to give any advice to people becoming an astrologer these days, we've talked a lot about approach and being open and stuff. If you had to give a piece of advice to an astrologer like me who's just coming into the game, what do you have any wisdom that you would give?
Well, I would go to the confident level, even though you've heard my whole scenario about understanding the signs and the person and the thing. But the truth is this: whoever coming to you, the universe is sent to you for a reason.
That makes me feel very good.
Saying. Yeah. They sent it because you're the person they need to hear it from.
I have felt this in my practice. Yeah.
And so somehow there's something you have to say to them that they need to hear. So don't feel that it shouldn't happen or you don't know enough. Take what you know and use it to the best of your knowledge. You could be surprised what a great reading you could have if you only knew 3 things about that chart.
No
if you
kidding.
Use those 3 things right, and you let the person talk and contribute, you'd be surprised the reading you could have.
Wow.
But also what you have to know is, just because you learn the basics about a sign or an aspect, don't think you know it. You need to know it in experience. So every chart, every person that comes from you should take away some learning experience from it. How did that Saturn Mars really work in that person's life? Well, I never thought it could work that way.
Right.
Well, it did.
Yes.
And it didn't. So, it's like, okay, there's something to learn every time we read it. If you learn they will learn from you and you will learn from them and how they use their chart. Make sure you do learn from them, because that's the only way you're going to grow as an astrologer.
Wonderful.
But remember, you have something to give. That's why they're there.
Yeah, thank you, Linda. That is such a great way. You put it in an open way so that, we are in a process of development.
Yes. And if you have the right intention, the person will love you for it. They will come to you, whether you have all the knowledge or not. Maybe what you're giving them is exactly what they're looking for.
And that's why they came to you.
Yeah, that's what they came to you. So, if they're at your door, there's a reason.
Thank you, Linda. This is a wonderful. This has been yes, I appreciate your time so much.
No problem.
So this has been a good session for me, Linda. Is there anything else you want to say before we go?
No. I have a website, lindajoyce.com, and Perfect. I have 2 books out: The Day You Were Born and The Man Thing, which is I've interviewed 100 men. Mm-hmm. And that's going to go up soon. It's on Kindle right now, but the book will be up soon too. And that's amazing if you want to know about men.
It'd be nice to know about the male psychology from the point of view of an astrologer who's...
No, it's their own quotes. I've just organized it. And it's not by interview, it's by subject.
Gotcha.
So you can hear what all the men are viewpoints on a certain subject. And it's not anything what you could think.
Cool. Well, I can't wait to check it out, Linda. I'm very excited to see it.
But anyway, I wish you all well. Studying astrology is the most empowering thing you can do in your life, whether you use it for other people or just yourself. It is something that will always keep giving and keep growing and learning from it. So it's the best thing that ever happened to me.
Cool. Well, thank you for sharing your years of experience and knowledge about it, Linda.
Problem.
It's going to be inspiring to many people like me who are getting to that level.
Okay.
So, Linda, I'm gonna end this video for now, and then maybe you and I could say a goodbye.
Okay. No
so for everybody watching, thank you so much for being a part of the show, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. Make sure to check out lindajoyce.com. Was that it, Linda?
Yes, it is.
And check out some of the great things that Linda's got coming for us. Thanks for watching, folks.